Alrighty, I think we're going. Welcome back to this thing. I'm pretty sure today's Thursday. I'm pretty sure. I hope yours is going swell. Uh, Today, meetings. I feel like I was just in meetings for a really long time today. Um, yeah, not really much fun to say there. Yesterday was a little more interesting. Got to do another rehearsal for percussion ensemble. I know just earlier this week you were talking about what was it? Like learning to play a new instrument, like during a like not during a concert. That sounds absolutely horrifying, but just picking up a new instrument. I mentioned there that I've been playing bass for a bit of time now. Uh, Still pretty new at it. Like I definitely can't like sight read something, uh, meaning I can't look at music just and start playing that. I need to uh, think about it for a bit. Like there's probably some stuff that I could do, like super duper basic things. Um, but yesterday we were playing a jazz chart. I had to look at one part beforehand, um, but really the rest of it I was just kind of going with it. I was surprised at how well that went. I had only been practicing a few of the riffs in there that were very repetitious, but still fairly difficult, or at least for me to read. Um, and I think it's just every time the director for the group is just like, I thought I gave you something fairly difficult to read this time, and I'm like, it's definitely harder than stuff in the past, and just like still sounded like really good. And I'm like, oh, thanks. So I'm not sight reading it right now, but it's still even for me, it surprised me that like just in maybe a half hour of practicing, I was able to get most of that tuned down, despite me really not playing the instrument that much. I thought that was kind of neat, and a little bit of a, I don't know, it's not sequel, a continuation of the last video about me having uh, played bass, learned bass, things like that. This is kind of neat. But yeah, that was yesterday. Today we're in today, and one of the things that's been kind of on my mind, it's it's with regards to Prismatic Planet, I think. Though it can probably span out to different things. It's kind of crazy to me how when you're thinking of when you're trying to think of something to talk about or look into or write. In my case, I'm writing fairly often for that site, and for like this channel here, I'm like making videos fairly frequently. Um, like sometimes it's hard to think about what you want to talk about or kind of dive into. For this thing, it's really just whatever's whatever I'm thinking about. So it's not terribly difficult to come up with something, since it's really just all off the cuff. But when you have like a purposeful content, a purposeful thing that you want to create, sometimes it's hard to think about what you want to talk about. And when I'm thinking about it, it's usually like it's hard because there aren't things that I can think to talk about. When I think about it, it's kind of the other way around. Like there are just too many things to write about or to dive into, and it makes it difficult to choose just one. And I think I'm kind of realizing that the longer I am writing posts for Prismatic Planet, the like for the educational pages, I think that might be the other way around, where it's just I might not be coming up with things that I want to say anymore because I've covered a lot of core concepts in ecology, and one of the types of pages that I make are just kind of like things that interested me while I was learning about another core concept. So like I'll talk about things like relationship ecology, trophic levels, how energy moves through the earth, moves into ecosystems and on its way out. just different types of biomes, like marine ecosystems, forests, deserts, things like that. Um, and of course biogeochemical cycles, which is actually a real word. Um, don't trust your spell check with that one. Um, those are all like they're finite things. Like there's if you're talking about things on a base level, you might run out of things to talk about at that base level. You end up needing to get into more depth. Um, but for the other main content that I put together for that site is human nature, which is very broadly defined by comparison. It's just in some way a way that humans and the environment intersect, and just diving into that. And there are so many angles that you can approach that from. It's almost intimidating how much you can actually just write about or talk about, which is great from like having things to talk about. But there's so much interesting things out there, so many interesting things out there. It's hard to choose one every month. Like sometimes I'll feel like I'm pretty stumped for a good chunk of the month. Like I don't know exactly what I want to write about. Like I've done other things that I've been interested in, and a part of me wants to return to some of those sometimes. Like I had recently done two things on how humans interact with the scientific process. One of them was citizen science, and the other one was volunteering. Both of those kind of share some space if they were circles in a Venn diagram, that citizen scientists can be volunteers and volunteers can be citizen scientists. They don't have to be both, but they kind of overlap a little bit in that regard. And like a few things are kind of like how, like I'm thinking about how people are stewards to the environment. They like care for the environment. I had done one that was like places in human nature, where I'd watched a documentary on a person from New Zealand who took over just this like swath of protected land and turned it into just a very huge reserve, just over time, taking care of it for years. And like I usually like lock myself into thinking about intersections like that. But when I think about how much humans can, I think I keep using the word intersect, but really that's kind of what it is. When something about the environment collides with something about humanity, and something comes of that. And like when you really break it down, like everything that's inspired people has come from some interaction with nature. Not very often do we just come up with something out of the blue and it's just an idea that has no basis in reality. So when you start to pull back that veil, there is actually a lot to talk about, a lot to think about. This month I'm thinking I'm doing how or why humans kept gardening after it wasn't really about like self-sustaining or being able to support yourself and your family, because that does have roots in just survival mentality, and then going into farming and agriculture and caring for like yourself, your family. But then when we got beyond that, people still garden for its connection, that for the connection they feel it gives them to nature. And I kind of felt like diving into that aspect a little bit. One, why do we do it? Why do people like to do it? Are there proven benefits? Are there proven downsides to this? Is it because normally when people are like managing a garden, they're going for a certain aesthetic, and depending on what that aesthetic is, they like, I want these types of plants, but those might not work very well for where you're at, for where you are geographically speaking. Not just that the plants won't survive very well, but that they might actually be harmful to the environment around you. And I'm a little curious about getting into those details a little bit. That might be a little too much for me to cover in the few days I have left for this month, but I definitely want to at least dip my toes into that a little bit and then see if there is more depth that I can go into, maybe have a follow-up to that at a later time. But just thinking about how if you take a step back, and when you're thinking about how two things interact, especially two things as, well, still specific yet entirely too vague as humanity and the earth. There are a lot of things that you can talk about with either one of those things on their own. And you can take any one of those things and just cross them. And you potentially have another topic to talk about. How those two things interact. One of the things that I've been thinking about is, and I haven't done it yet because I feel like I need a good chunk of time, and I'd really love to have a piece to start with. Is what's a good way to say this? Like musical inspiration from nature. A lot of music doesn't just get its what it sounds like from nature. They just like straight rip the name like from nature. Things like Pines of Rome, where it's literally just calling out trees in a location. Go ahead and let the dog scratch and itchy. Yep, you get that. You get that, Rose. Okay, you can stop anytime you want now. She's still going. Okay, that must have been a really big itch. Anyway. But just because I have that background in music too, where it might be interesting to not only analyze that from like what the composer was thinking, but also, and what they wanted to convey, but also if they went into any detail about like, why did they choose the sounds that they did? Did the melody have any basis in like reality or our world as we know it? One piece that I had played in college was called Morning Dove Sonnet. It's a vibraphone piece where you implement pitch bending. You strike a note and then you use a harder mallet and then push it into the key and then sort of drag it in or outward, and that bends the pitch, so you get a wee woo sound out of the vibraphone. It's metallic. It's kind of a neat sound. The first time I heard that, I was like, that's really cool. Talk about extended technique. But it sort of blew my mind when I had heard a mourning dove cry for the first time, and I'm like, that's it. That's a mourning dove. Like, that is what they sound like. This whole piece revolves around one sound from a bird in reality. And I think that's pretty cool. And I'm sure the two examples there that I gave aren't the only ones. The more and more I was thinking about it, the more and more pieces that kept coming to mind. So it's really just, sometimes when I feel like I have a block, like I don't know what to write about, it's taking that step back and being like, what's an aspect of humanity? What's something that we do that required quite a bit of inspiration, thought, and then seeing how that intersects with nature, with the environment, with the earth, with its systems or its inhabitants or any such thing. In the case of that Morning Dove Sonnet example, it is music with birdsong. And I actually just pulled up a news story for the newsletter. I don't think I'm going to include this one in the one for January, but there is a birdsong researcher who is building, basically putting together songs that that incorporate sounds of nature into those songs using sort of do-it-yourself like instruments, things that he just made. I think it was pretty neat. It's pretty cool. But like, see, it's like I didn't really. I felt like for the first half of this month, maybe it was just because of coming out of holidays and stuff, I just didn't find anything that I wanted to talk about. I couldn't think of anything. Like my mindset was too narrow, and like just taking that step back, like I said, and just being like, what's something that humans do? There's a lot, clearly. How does that relate to our planet? Think about it. Talk about it. Do whatever. And I'll like literally never run out of things to talk about if that's the approach that I take to writing for these particular posts. Anyway, I thought it was kind of neat. If you do, I always do a takeaway. Like, what's the takeaway? I don't know why I do that for all of these, but I guess it's just a thing. I guess takeaway there. If you're feeling particularly stuck when you're trying to write or in some way create or design something, take a moment to check yourself and see, ask yourself, am I thinking too narrowly? What am I trying to do? What am I trying to talk about? What am I trying to figure out and convey? Am I thinking too much about one thing? Am I putting self-made barriers in my way to keep me from seeing the full scope of what I can talk about? In the case of my example, it might be beneficial to have two very broad topics that you want to bring together and analyze how they interact with each other. In my case, it was humans, nature, thus the blog, Human Nature. Aha, so clever. But I don't think it's a stretch to think that you can apply that to literally any topic. So if you like technology for any reason, and you are interested in how humans evolve to the point they are where they're using technology, then intersecting how humans do things, anything humans do with technology, can be a way to do that. You can literally do the same exercise that I just did, and it was humans garden. How does that interact with technology? Look into any types of mechanical, digital aspects to how humans have built things better built things in a way that makes gardening easier or harder or beneficial or worse. A lot that you can explore. Anyway, I think that's probably about it for today. I keep talking way longer than I anticipate. I'm I won't have more than 5 minutes to talk about here, and I just keep going. Anywho, hopefully it's not terrible for people who stumble upon these. Hopefully my voice is only mildly annoying. In any case, hope you're having a wonderful Thursday, and you continue going into Friday and having a wonderful Friday as well. And we will catch you in the next one. See ya.